Hello everyone. After last week's class, a couple of you sent me emails asking me to explain the anchor point change that we did during the lesson in class. So I put together this short video to show you how that is done. So what we did in class is we imported the energy ball video that I sent you, and then we went to its interpret footage. Under File, we went to Interpret Footage. You can find it File, Interpret Footage, Main, or you can also left click on the item, right click, sorry, on the item in the project window, and then you'll find the interpret footage from the flyout menu. So if you click on Main, then we went down to the bottom of this interface window and we expanded our loops from 1 to 5, which I've already done for this one. So when I place that item into my composition by dragging it into the composition, it will occupy the entire length of my composition, which in this case is 10 seconds. So this will keep on looping for 10 seconds. With that done, what we did is we went ahead and placed the moon file in that composition on top of the layer. Now you'll notice that when I'm dragging that footage onto the composition, I get a little blue line that indicates where this is going to be placed. So if I place it up here at the top, right above the layer, it will be dumped on top of that layer. If I drag it by clicking on the icon and dragging it down, then I can switch the position of the layers. This is done by clicking on the icon and dragging. So I'll place the moon in front again, and then I'll simply scale it down. So I'm going to scale it down. I think we did like 20% or something like that. We might want to do a bit smaller. Let's say 15%. Now you've noticed that I use my shortcut S to call the scale transformation for that particular layer. Making sure that it's selected, I press S and it opens up the scaling value, and then I simply change the value. Notice as well that both of these values are linked through that little link right here. We're constraining proportions. So if I change one, both of them will change. If I click on that little link, notice that it disappears, which means they're no longer constrained, which means I can change them separately. So I could make this wider than it is taller if I wanted to do something like that. Chances are you don't want to do that, so maintain it as linked unless you intend to deform the actual footage. So in our case, what we did is we went ahead and created rotation keyframes for that particular layer. So we make sure that the layer continues to be selected, and then we'll use the shortcut R on the keyboard. R calls rotation. And then we would go ahead and click on the little time watch, the stopwatch on the left-hand side of the transformation that we're changing, in this case rotation. Click on that, and that activates keyframes. It sets my first linear keyframe at the very beginning. Remember, I just mentioned it's a linear keyframe. And then I can go ahead and place another keyframe elsewhere on the composition. So as long as I move my time marker downstream to whatever I intend to place the other keyframe, in my case, I'm just going to go all the way to the end of the composition, I can go ahead and change the value of that transformation by either adding degrees of rotation or amounts of rotation. So the first number, the one right here, right next to the times sign to the X, that indicates the amount of rotation. So 1 rotation, 2 rotation, 3 rotation, and so on. For this one, this indicates the amount of degrees that we want to rotate. So if we only want to rotate half a rotation, that would be 180 degrees. So I can go ahead and place this. I'll click on the first one and I'll say I want that moon to rotate 3 times, let's say 4 times, and 10 seconds that I have in this composition. Then I hit return so that the number takes. And when I scrub my video, you'll notice that the moon is rotating. The reason is because we had already created a keyframe by clicking on the stopwatch and then changing the value after that original keyframe or reference keyframe will create a new keyframe. With that done, then what we proceeded to do was to offset the anchor point. Now the way we did it in class was by keeping the layer selected. We pressed the A key on the keyboard to call its anchor point transformation value. And then I went ahead and changed the X value only. So that means I moved it to the right. And I believe I used a value of like 3,500. Let me just use 3,200 this time. And you'll notice that my anchor point remains in the center of my composition, but the artwork inside that layer, it's offset by that many pixels. Let me undo the value, the change that I just did, and you'll notice that the original value was 960. 960 by 540 is exactly half the screen size. Right now, I am working at 1280 by 720. I believe that's what, let's see what it is. 1280 by 720. That is the size of my composition. So the midpoint for my composition is right there. So if I go ahead and say, for example, offset this to 3200, it moves it in that direction, and that's the new position based on the amount of pixels that I moved it. Now, if I scrub my video, you'll notice that the moon rotates around the orb in the center. And that is because the offset value maintained the anchor point in the center of the screen, but the artwork itself inside the layer was offset. So the layer is still rotating based on this point right here in the middle. That is the point of reference. That's my anchor point. But the moon, the artwork, is offset from that center. Therefore, it will be rotating around the orb as such. There we go. We will pick up on this exercise in our next class.